This is Brent Allen Winters. We're starting with the laws of nature before we get to the Bible, the laws of nature's God. Question 172 of 333 questions of Stansbury, Arthur J. Stansbury's Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Listen to what he says. He said, did the states, when they made the agreement called the Constitution of the United States, did the states give up any other power? Answer, yes. The states, our Constitution forbids the states to pass any bill of attainder or ex post facto law, grant any title of nobility. Now watch this one. Nor is any state allowed to make any law which shall impair the obligation of contract. Nor shall any state make any law which shall impair, impede, hamper, end, whatever, any obligation of contract. What is an obligation of contract? I refer you to, first of all, the Bible. What's the most powerful statement in the Bible on the obligation of contract? It is well known around the world, one of the greatest known verses in the Bible. Well, what is it? Thou shalt not bear false witness. And included in that grand principle is thou shalt not lie. What is a lie? Oh, that's a breaking of that's making a promise that you don't intend to keep. What is a contract? A contract is the law of promises. To put it into English, undertakings, commitments, expressed. How does that work? Well, to know more about the law of contracts, I refer you to the website commonlawyer.com and look up the course called Contract at Common Law, or some such a thing, I think it says, and take that course. I come at contracts at common law. Is there any other kind? No, that's a Christian tradition. The contracts at common law are from the same source, the law or common law. So the Bible, we start with the Bible, and we talk about the law of promises. We start with our Maker, the Godhead. And we discover that there's one thing that God, the lawgiver, says he cannot do. One thing he cannot do. He is big, he's sovereign, he is all powerful, without limit, all knowing, but there's one thing he cannot do. Can God make a rock so big he can't pick it up if he wants to? He made everything, seen and unseen, in the skies and on the land. There's nothing he can't do, but this one thing he says, I cannot, I am unable, absolutely unable to lie, to break my promise, whatever my promise is. If I say it, that's it. That's why this book is so important. It reveals to us overall what it does. Everything in it is given to reveal to us what God, our lawgiver, our maker, intends, has committed himself to do. Every book, every page, every paragraph, every sentence is calculated so that we, his people, may better know what he will do. And we are commanded to pray pray, swap our wishes for his will as we understand it. And you won't understand it, and you won't know sick'em from come here about it. And your prayers will be absolutely empty and meaningless. A waste of time. If you don't know something about what God wants, his will, and the will of the sovereign is law. What's he going to do? The law of God foretells the future. It is his promise of what will happen. He starts out off in an overall way and says, do this and you'll live. Don't do it and you'll die. And then it gets more precise as he moves through the revelation of the book we call the Bible. And we are to pray for what he's going to do. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And then he continues, the prayer continues. Thy kingdom come, what's this? Thy will be done. We are to pray that his will be done. And the more, that's a good thing to say in general. Say, Jesus Christ said, pray like this, thy will be done. But let's be more particular where we know, and the Bible gets a lot more particular. That's the general statement that covers everything. Thy will be done. What is the will of the sovereign? It is law, the law of God in this book. That's what this book is about, telling us what he likes and what he doesn't like, what he wants and what he's going to do and not going to do, put it that way. And knowing what he's going to do in the future, knowing his law is to know the future. You know, the most popular people that write books in the history of the world were men that claimed to tell you the future. Nostradamus or Damus Notre, whatever that galoot's name was, I don't care about him. He's a false prophet, but I'm making the point, somebody made a fortune printing that baloney. Because people want to know. They think, oh, here's a man that knows the future. Present-day prophets or what they're on the internet. They claim, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the future. People that run Ouija boards try to figure out what's going to happen in the future, think the Ouija board's going to tell them. They read tea leaves, tarot cards. Why? Because they think they're going to know what's going to happen in the future. Back to the Future was a popular movie. Fun to watch. Why? Well, it made people, it gave them a fantasy that, hey, maybe we can know the future, because if you can know the future, you know what's going to happen. That's why inside information is against the law, because you know that if you find out what people are going to do to manipulate the markets and you invest on that basis, it's crime. Martha Stewart went to prison under that accusation. Now, I'm not saying sweet darling Martha did that. I don't know. But that was the accusation. It's called insider trading. It's against the law. People do want to know the future. And God said, I'll give you one authorized way to know it. And if you seek any other way to know the future, I'll put a whooping on you. If you're God's people, he'll chastise you. He'll blister your bottom, as it were. Operation Woodshed. Straighten you out. He won't allow that, friends. Seances, necromancy, communicating with the dead. I've had people tell me that their mother or their brother or their dead spouse, some passed away. I saw a movie years ago. Johnny Cash and his wife, June Carter, starred in the movie, and Johnny Cash played, it was a rendition of a true story that really happened that I had read about years ago, a murder, I believe down in Georgia, and Johnny Cash was the sheriff that finally found the murderer. But in the movie, June Carter played the part of a witch. Now, I wouldn't want to do that, and I would not have advised June to do that if she had asked me. But she did. She played the part. And the man that committed the murder, like Saul in the Bible, sought out the advice of a witch, the witch of Endor. Remember in the Bible, King Saul of Israel, desperate, nobody to turn to. That's the way it is up on the top. There's nobody to turn to more powerful than you. That's why Abe Lincoln's wife conducted at least 8 seances in the White House. At least 8. That was evil, friends. The Bible, the law of God forbids that, seeking to know the future through some medium other than God himself. And God himself, through the medium of this book, has told us what the future will be. And as not just the book of Revelation and prophecy, the law of God is the fundamental prophecy of God. We're in it here in the book of Exodus. We're in it. We're talking about it. And we're going to continue, Lord willing, to move through it. Well, we don't know the future unless we know what God has said he will do. And he says what he will do most fundamentally by the books of the law upon which all the Bible rests for a foundation. All of the Bible rests for a foundation on the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You don't know those books, you don't know squat. That's why we're going through them. Jesus Christ quoted from the writings of Moses. The second greatest prophet is Moses. The first greatest prophet is Jesus Christ. Islam has it backwards. Did you know that? Islam says Moses is the greatest prophet and Jesus Christ is the second greatest prophet. What does the Bible call that? Blasphemy. A crime of treason. Jesus Christ don't play second fiddle to nobody. He won't. No matter what all the weird beards on the other side of the world say. Well, we're talking here about promises, the law of God. The law of God gives us prophecy by telling us the consequences of breaking his law, of overstepping inadvertently or intentionally. The law of God. Jesus Christ, did I say this? Quotes from the book of Deuteronomy or more than any other book, the second statement of the law of God, Deuteronomy, Deutero, 2, nomos, law. But the states gave up this power. Watch me. This is constitutional law. This is common law government. This is based upon the law of the... No, I won't say that again. It's from the same source as the law of the Bible. Now, we're going to talk here just a minute. I think we mentioned this before about the year of Jubilee. The year, as the Hebrew text puts it, the Hebrew word, Jubal. Jubal. Or we should say it the way they said it. They wouldn't say Jubal, Jubilee. They'd say Jawohl. Almost sound like the German, Jawohl, Commandant. You see in all the World War II movies, Jawohl. It's like that word very much. Matter of fact, the consonants are all the same, and there are no vowels written in the Semitic tongues like Hebrew. The year of Yabol. What is the year of Jubilee? Remember, everything in the Bible, everything in the law of God, everything in the system of God's law, and our common law rests very firmly upon a principle that drives our eyes and our minds forward constantly, not to look back. Not to look back. Fix your eyes forward. What is it in the Bible that overarches all of the Bible, that fixes God's man and God's woman, fixes eyes forward? What is it? God help us. It's the Sabbath principle. Sabbath, that's a Hebrew word, Sabbat. Sabbat. What does it mean? It means 7. That's the way you pronounce the number 7. And the Bible, all of the law of God and all of existence as God's people operates under this system of 7s as applied to time. Isn't it something? Remember, the Sabbath controls all of the law of God. It's the overarching first principle. It's mentioned first in the Bible, right after creation. Remember, it was 6 days. God created everything in 6 yoms in the Hebrew, yoms. What is a yom? It's from sundown to the next sundown. That's a yom. And the evening and the morning were day 1. That's the first time it's mentioned. That sets the principle. Before the sun was even created. Did you know that? Isn't that something? That's what it says. Now, is that a contradiction? No. As a matter of logic, that is not a contradiction. The sun was created later. It's something we don't understand. We're not sure what's going on. But logic? No, logic, that's not a contradiction. A contradiction is 2 things. 2 things that cannot be true at the same time and in the same relationship. 2 things that cannot be true at the same time and in the same relationship. But 2 things you don't understand that are true at the same time, and that doesn't make sense to you, that's not a contradiction. I've mentioned these fundamental principles before, and just to make an example, the Jehovah's Witnesses say that it's a contradiction to say that Jesus Christ is fully God and Jesus Christ is fully man, the son of Adam. They say that's a contradiction. No, it's not. As a matter of logic, it's something that we can't explain. We can explain it to a degree, but not entirely. Because what you've got there is 100% God, lawgiver, Elohim, Yehovah, and 100% a son of Adam. They say that can't be, and that's a contradiction. They're wrong. Just because you don't understand something doesn't make it a contradiction. In my neck of the woods, the people I grew up around, all those old folk, when they come to the Bible and they saw something they didn't understand, well, it says here that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And then they read over there a little later and it says, Pharaoh hardened his heart. And then they'd say, that don't make no sense. And I call it the that don't make no sense test. That don't make no sense. That's exactly the way folks said it. That don't make no sense. Well, if it don't make no sense, we need to think about it, but don't dismiss it. Just because you don't understand it, God's bigger than you and your finite, feeble brain. Our feeble brains don't understand everything that God says, but we can know it's true. We can know it's true. That's a fact. But there's nothing wrong with applying that old test. That don't make no sense. It's got, and then look at it a little closer. We're talking about the laws of nature, our common law tradition, and the laws of nature's God, the written tradition, the laws of nature's God called the Bible. Our common law tradition, unwritten, but meant to be observed, nonetheless true, nonetheless law. We're talking about a power. The states have no power under a constitution to impair, change, do away with, alter obligations of contract. Promises, obligations, you oblige yourself, you create an owing when you make a contractual promise. Contract is, watch me, don't miss this, contract is debt. Show me a contract, I'll show you a debt. Show me a debt, I'll show you a contract. In our common law tradition, there is no such thing as debt without contract. Contract is debt. What about taxes? Let's clear up some patriot mythology. What about taxes? If taxes are lawful, they aren't debts. No. If taxes are lawful, they are not debts. Taxes, lawful taxes, are obligations, not debts. There's a difference. Our courts have made this distinction, still make it, use different words. Why? Because taxes, if they're lawful, are a duty. That's why we call some taxes duties. It's in the news now. Tariffs. What are tariffs? Duties. We sometimes call them duties because there's something that people do that arises out of law, not out of contract. Or you're here, you want to do that here, or you have a duty to pay this tax, a duty. And we call it a duty because it is a duty. Duty arises out of law. Debt arises out of private contract. There it is. See, don't mix that up. Well, if you make a contractual obligation, the state governments in America, according to our Constitution, have no authority to do away with those obligations of contract, to impair a promise, do away with a promise. Well, does anybody have that? Yes. Yes, in America, yes. Our Constitution says who has it, and I'll tell you who has it. The federal courts have that power. It's called bankruptcy court. Bankruptcy court is, by definition, the impairing or otherwise doing away with an obligation of contract, changing it, altering it, or doing away with it altogether in a specific instance. Why did I mention the year of Jubal, the sevens? The sevens keep you looking forward, the 7-day Sabbath. 7-year Sabbath for the land. Isn't it something? God applies the Sabbath to us as his people. The Sabbath principle, the principle of sevens. He applies it to his land. And who else does he apply it to? Or what else? So who else? He applies it to himself. He applied it to himself before he applied it to us and the land. Does that tell you anything? Well, it's important. If even he falls under its law, he cannot lie. And then the two things in his creation, his two creations, more important than anything else in his creation, are land, his land, and us, his people. And he puts his people on his land to take lordship over it and make it productive for our enjoyment. And he applies the 7-day Sabbath principle to the land. Why is that important? Because the land, not 7-day Sabbath principle, the 7-year Sabbath principle. For us, it's 7 days to rest. For the land, it's 7 years to rest. And for all of the nation, every 7 times 70 years, every 49 years, the next year, the 50th year, is the year of Jubal, where obligations of contract all end. Why? Because among sinful mankind, wealth migrates into the hands of a few. It always does. And the 7 times 70 years ending of all obligations of contract by law, the law of God resets. It's called a reset today. Resets everything. That's what the Bible says. Do it God's way. Do it God's way. You see, if you think that all obligations of contract are going to end on that 7 times 7 years, and you know what that year is, which you do, you adjust your behavior accordingly. You wouldn't enter into a mortgage arrangement or a loan of money payable over, not that you should charge usury, I'm not saying that, but you wouldn't enter into a contract. For example, let me give you another example. According to the Bible, a man can indenture himself as a servant to another man for up to 6 years. See, there's that 7, and in the 7th year, he goes free. But you can do that. You can enslave yourself to, if you want to. for whatever reason. You can do it, but there's a limit. It's not abject slavery that just goes on forever and he can sell you. He's not allowed to do that. So it's not really slavery, but it's called indentured servitude. And in the Bible, it says, yes, you can do that if you want. It went on in America for years until very recently, called indentured servitude. I'd use the example of Kit Carson. He was indentured to a saddle maker in Missouri when he was a boy, 14 years old. Indentured servant, to learn the trade, in Missouri, St. Joseph, Missouri. And it was from there that he went west and became famous, but he was an indentured servant. Hundreds of thousands of men in America were indentured servants. That was the system whereby often a young man learned a trade. Well, if you know that on the 7 times 7 years, and then in the 50th year, you know that all contracts cease, and you bring on a man as an indentured servant for 6 years, and you know in 3 years the Sabbath year or the year of Jubilee, Jubal comes. You know you're not going to get your money's worth. You plan ahead, see? You plan ahead. That's what the Sabbath principle is all about. Sabbath days every week, you plan ahead. No work on the Sabbath. Do your work. You got to feed your cattle, milk your cows, feed your chickens. Yeah. And the Bible makes provision for all that. But working for the man is not to be done on the seventh day. Horses are animals that work for the man, and you're not to work your horses and your beast of burden on the seventh day. Now, I know there are a lot of things that come up. What do you do if you're going to drive your buggy to church? All those problems the Bible deals with, we're speaking of general principles here. The general government of the United States, not the state governments, but the general government of the United States, the courts of the United States that Congress puts in place under authority given to Congress by this document we call our Constitution, establishes courts that can impair obligation of contract. It's called bankruptcy. What is bankruptcy? It is impairing obligation of contract. It is our answer, by the way, our answer to the Bible's year of Jubal, the 47 times 70 years, and the 50th year, the year of Pentecost. 50. Pentecost means 50. Justice Joseph Story of the U.S. Supreme Court has made the point that, and in his commentaries on the Constitution of the United States, to not have this provision in the Constitution of some outlet where obligation of contracts can be ended, and the overwhelming, unending burden of debt can be lifted from a man. Without that, we have devolved into the worst ages, the worst times of paganism. Because it is Christian, he says, according to this book even, to provide a way for men to rid themselves of the burden of debt when it becomes apparent that they can't. It's perpetual. It's perennial. It won't go away. It will destroy the life. That's why we have bankruptcy courts in America, but we do limit them. We do limit them to the government, our national government, that our Constitution establishes. Why is it that states, the 50 states, have no authority to hold bankruptcy courts and impair obligation of contract? Well, thank you. The reason is, of course, if I'm in the state of Wyoming and some man from the state, I owe $100,000 to a man from the state of Nebraska, and the man in Nebraska knows the contract. The state of Wyoming has jurisdiction over it, and he comes into the Wyoming courts and he says, I want relief Or he comes into the Nebraska courts, he said, yeah, they would have jurisdiction. And the man in Nebraska says, this guy in Wyoming owes me money. And they go into bankruptcy court. Well, the Nebraska court is going to do what the man from Nebraska wants because he's got political power there. They're not going to give this man from Wyoming a break, and they're not going to end his obligation of contract. They're going to say, you pay him the money or we're going to put you in debtor's prison. In other words, you'd have battles going on between the states. And the free flow, people would be afraid to contract with people from other states for goods and services. And the free flow of goods and services across state lines would end. The interstates would not be running full of semi-trucks with goods from one state to another. Because if there's a contractual dispute in one state, and the states have the power of bankruptcy court, that means to end obligation of contract. Each state's bankruptcy courts will favor the person before the court that's from that state. So the Constitution says no state can do that, only the general government, and on neutral ground, keeping the commerce flowing here, a little bit of fairness, that's called process, due process. Only the general government in Washington, D.C. has power to impair contracts. Well, what does that mean? Answer, what does this mean, all what I've said? It means that when a bargain has been made between any two parties by which one agrees to bind himself to some particular thing, debt, and then forbidden by law, the state in which this agreement or contract was made shall not afterwards make any law by which the person who thus bound himself shall be set free from any part of that bargain without the consent of the other party with whom the contract is made. That's pretty complicated, I think, a way to say it. I hope I got it across. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.